The rain had a way of erasing identities. It flattened the city into reflections and shadows, turning billionaires and beggars into the same blurred silhouettes. On that night, soaked streets swallowed the sound of luxury cars and street vendors alike, and no one noticed when a man who owned half the skyline stepped out of a bus wearing a torn jacket and shoes with cracked soles. Ethan Blackwood paused under a flickering streetlight, water dripping from his hair onto his collar. For the first time in 30 years, no one knew his name. No assistants. No security. No tailored suits or private elevators. Just a thin wallet with a few crumpled bills and a simple phone stripped of contacts. This was not a game, and it was not charity. It was a test, one he hadn't planned, but desperately needed. That morning, Ethan had signed papers worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. By evening, he had walked out of his glass tower with a hollow feeling he couldn't explain. At 61, admired and feared in equal measure, he had everything except the one thing he couldn't buy any more, certainty that his success meant something. The boardroom applause still echoed in his ears when he remembered a question his late wife once asked him, years before cancer took her away. "If everything disappeared tomorrow," she had said softly, "would anyone help you just because you're you?" He had laughed back then. Tonight, soaked and anonymous, the question burned. A gust of wind cut through his jacket, and for the first time in decades, Ethan felt cold in a way no temperature-controlled penthouse could prepare him for. He began walking, counting his steps, forcing himself not to reach for the reflexes of wealth. He passed a closed cafe, its lights warm and unreachable. Hunger gnawed at him, not dramatic, not desperate, just constant. The kind that made decisions harder. Near a run-down bus stop, he saw them. A woman sat on the bench, her shoulders hunched protectively over a little girl curled beside her. The child's sneakers were wet through, her socks darkened by rain. The woman held a thin shawl over both of them, though it barely did its job. She couldn't have been more than 35, but exhaustion had added years to her face. Ethan slowed without meaning to. The girl noticed him first. Her eyes widened, not with fear, but curiosity. She tugged gently at her mother's sleeve. The woman looked up, wary at first, then cautious, like someone who had learned that kindness often came with conditions. "Sir?" the woman said, her voice polite but guarded. Are you waiting for the bus?" Ethan hesitated. He had negotiated hostile takeovers without blinking, but this simple question caught him off guard. "Yes," he said finally. "I think so." The girl shifted closer to her mother. "The bus is late," she said, as if offering an apology on behalf of the city. Ethan nodded. He glanced at the schedule, half-torn, unreadable. "It happens," he replied. Silence settled between them, broken only by rain tapping metal. Ethan could have kept walking. He could have found a shelter, or even ended this experiment early with a single phone call. But something rooted him there. Perhaps it was the way the woman kept adjusting the shawl to make sure it covered her daughter first, even as her own hands trembled with cold. The girl sniffed. "Mama, I'm hungry." The woman stiffened almost imperceptibly, then smiled too quickly. "I know, sweetheart. Just a little longer." Ethan felt a strange pressure in his chest. Hunger for him was temporary, chosen. For them, it wasn't. He reached into his pocket and found the small loaf of bread he had bought earlier, unsure why. It was still wrapped, slightly warm. He stared at it for a second longer than necessary, then held it out. "Would she like some?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. The woman's eyes dropped to the bread, then lifted again. Pride and need wrestled silently on her face. "That's very kind," she said slowly, "but you don't know us." Ethan met her gaze. "That's true," he said, "but I know what it's like to be hungry." It wasn't entirely a lie. After a pause that felt longer than the rain-soaked night deserved, the woman nodded. "Thank you," she said, quietly. The girl took the bread with both hands, eyes shining as if it were something precious. "Thank you, mister," she said, breaking off a piece. Then, without being told, she held the rest toward her mother. "You first." Ethan looked away quickly, pretending to adjust his jacket. Something about that simple gesture, automatic, untrained generosity, hit him harder than any speech or donation gala ever had. The woman tore the loaf carefully, making 3 uneven portions. She handed one back to Ethan. "Please," she said. "You shared. You should eat too." For a second, he almost refused. Habit told him to decline, to maintain distance. But this wasn't a boardroom. He took the bread. "Thank you," he said, and meant it more deeply than he had said those words in years. They ate quietly. The rain softened to a drizzle. The bus still didn't come. "My name is Clara," the woman said eventually. "And this is Lily." "Ethan," he replied, leaving out the rest of the world that usually followed his name. Lily swung her legs. "We're going to my aunt's house," she said matter-of-factly. "Mama says things will be better there." Clara smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "We just need to get across town." Ethan nodded. He didn't ask why they were out so late, or why they looked like the night had already taken too much from them. Some truths announced themselves without questions. A car passed, splashing water near the curb. Lily laughed despite herself. Clara laughed too, surprised by it, as if joy had slipped out before she could stop it. Ethan felt something shift inside him, something long buried under quarterly reports and controlled narratives. "If you like stories like this," a quiet voice inside him seemed to whisper, "remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that change how you see the world." The bus headlights finally appeared in the distance, growing brighter. Clara gathered her things, lifting Lily into her arms. She turned to Ethan. "I don't know why you helped us," she said. "But, thank you. Truly." Ethan watched them board first. As he followed, a vibration pulsed in his pocket. The stripped-down phone. He froze. Only one person had that number. The screen lit up with a single message. "They've found you. Call immediately." Ethan looked up just in time to see Clara and Lily take a seat near the back, unaware that the man standing a few steps behind them was suddenly faced with a choice that could shatter this fragile moment forever. Ethan slipped the phone back into his pocket without opening the message again. The bus lurched forward, its engine groaning like it had lived too many lives, and the doors folded shut with a hiss that sounded final. Rain streaked across the windows as the city began to move past them in slow, uneven frames. He chose a seat 2 rows behind Clara and Lily, close enough to hear them, far enough not to intrude. Clara wiped Lily's hands with a tissue she pulled from her bag, then tucked the remaining bread away carefully, as if it were something to be saved for later rather than already half gone. Lily leaned her head against her mother's arm, eyelids fluttering as the warmth of the bus and a full stomach worked their quiet magic. Ethan rested his hands on his knees. The phone in his pocket felt heavier than it should have. "They've found you." He didn't need to ask who. His security chief, his board, perhaps even the media by now. He had vanished without warning. For the first time in his adult life, people were looking for him not because they needed a signature, but because they were afraid of what his absence meant. The bus rattled over a pothole, jolting Lily awake. She looked around, momentarily confused, then spotted Ethan. She smiled, small and sincere, as if they shared a secret. He nodded back. "Do you think Aunt Rosa will be awake?" Lily asked, her voice low but hopeful. Clara hesitated. "She will be," she said, though uncertainty crept into the edges of her words. "And if she's not, we'll figure something out." Ethan watched Clara's reflection in the window. The woman was carrying more than a child and a bag. She carried responsibility with the quiet endurance of someone who had learned that complaining wasted energy better spent surviving. He wondered what decision had put them on that bench in the rain, and what series of events had led her to accept bread from a stranger without shame. The bus slowed at a stop, doors opening to let in a man whose coat was too thin for the weather. He glanced around, then slid into the seat beside Ethan. "Cold night," the man muttered. "Yes," Ethan replied. The man laughed softly. "City doesn't care who you are. It treats everyone the same." Ethan almost smiled. As the bus moved again, his phone vibrated once more. He ignored it. Instead, his gaze drifted back to Clara and Lily. Lily had begun to hum quietly, an uneven melody that wandered but never quite fell apart. Clara rested her chin on her daughter's head, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. Ethan's mind slipped back years, uninvited. A hospital room filled with the steady beep of machines. His wife's hand in his, thin but warm. The way she had smiled at him even then. "Don't become someone who needs to disguise himself to find the truth," she had whispered. He hadn't understood then. He thought success was proof enough. The bus took a sharp turn, pulling him back to the present. Clara stood as the bus slowed again. "This is us," she said softly to Lily. Lily hopped down, suddenly wide awake. She turned and waved at Ethan. "Bye, Mr. Ethan." Clara smiled at him too. "I hope you get where you're going," she said. "So do I," he replied, surprising himself with the honesty of it. They stepped off into the night, rain still falling but lighter now. The doors closed, and the bus pulled away, leaving them framed for a moment in the red glow of the taillights before the darkness swallowed them. Ethan sat frozen as the distance grew. He had the absurd urge to follow them, to get off at the next stop and run back. The thought startled him. He had followed instincts all his life, markets, numbers, trends, but this was different. This was irrational. His phone vibrated again. This time he pulled it out. A missed call. Then another message. "This is serious. Investors are panicking. Media will spin this. You need to come back now." He stared at the words until the screen dimmed. The man beside him leaned over. "Bad news." "Complicated," Ethan said. The man snorted. "It always is." The bus continued, stops blurring together. Ethan realized he had no idea where he was supposed to get off. He had boarded without a destination, something he had never done before in his life. Every move he made was usually mapped, optimized. This wasn't. He pressed the stop button anyway. The bus hissed and slowed. Ethan stepped out onto a narrow street lined with old brick buildings, their windows glowing faintly. The rain had almost stopped, leaving the air smelling clean and sharp. He stood there as the bus pulled away, feeling the city settle around him. Another vibration. This time, the phone rang. He answered. "Yes. Where the hell are you?" His security chief's voice was tight, strained. "Do you have any idea what's happening?" "I have some idea," Ethan said calmly. "This isn't funny. This stunt. It's not a stunt." A pause. "Come back," the voice urged, softer now. "Please." Ethan closed his eyes. He pictured Clara's careful hands dividing the bread. Lily offering her share without hesitation. "I can't," he said. Silence stretched. Then, "At least tell me you're safe." Ethan looked down the empty street. "For now," he said, and ended the call. He slipped the phone into his pocket and started walking. A flickering sign ahead read rooms for rent. Beneath it, a smaller sign advertised weekly rates. He pushed open the door and was met with the smell of old carpet and disinfectant. Behind a scratched counter sat an elderly woman with sharp eyes and a paperback novel. She looked up. "You need a room?" "Yes," Ethan said. "Cash only." He nodded and counted out the bills. She eyed him, then shrugged, sliding a key across the counter. Second floor. No noise. The room was small, with a bed that sagged in the middle and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. Ethan set his jacket down and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence pressed in, louder than any penthouse ever was. He lay back, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in years, sleep didn't come easily. His thoughts returned again and again to Clara and Lily, to the way Lily had trusted him without knowing who he was, to the way Clara had thanked him like it mattered. Sometime near dawn, his phone buzzed with a new notification. Not from his team. From an unknown number. "Thank you again for tonight. Lily wouldn't stop talking about you. Clara." Ethan sat up slowly, heart pounding, questions colliding in his mind. He hadn't given her his number. He hadn't even remembered how she could have gotten it. He typed a reply, then deleted it. Typed again. "How did you get this number?" The 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then vanished. Appeared again. Before another message could come through, a knock sounded at the door. Sharp. Insistent. Ethan froze, eyes flicking from the phone to the door, as the knock came again, louder this time. Ethan rose slowly, every instinct honed over decades sharpening at once. He didn't answer the knock. Instead, he stepped lightly toward the door and peered through the narrow peephole. The hallway was dim, the overhead bulb flickering, casting uneven shadows. A man stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat that looked far too expensive for this place. His posture was rigid, alert. Another knock. Firmer. "Mr. Blackwood," a voice called quietly, controlled. "We need to talk." Ethan exhaled through his nose. So much for anonymity. He didn't open the door. "You have the wrong person," he said evenly. A pause. Then the man leaned closer to the door. "Sir, please. We don't want to cause a scene. But people are worried. Very worried." Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second. He imagined Lily asleep somewhere across the city, unaware that the man who shared bread with her hours ago controlled thousands of jobs, billions of dollars, and more power than he knew what to do with. The contrast made his chest ache. "I'm not coming back," Ethan said. Another voice joined in, lower, more urgent. Ethan opened the door. He recognized it instantly. Daniel Cross. His legal counsel. One of the few men who spoke to him without fear. Ethan stepped back from the door. "Go away." Silence. Then Daniel spoke again, softer now. "If you don't open this door, they'll escalate. Media. Police wellness checks. You know how this works." Ethan laughed quietly, humorless. "You're threatening me with my own systems." "We're trying to protect you," Daniel replied. Ethan glanced at the phone in his hand. Clara's message still glowed faintly on the screen. "Thank you again for tonight. Lily wouldn't stop talking about you. Protect." The word tasted strange now. "I'll be in touch," Ethan said. "But not tonight." He heard Daniel sigh. Footsteps shifted. A murmur of voices. Then, slowly, the hallway fell quiet. Ethan waited several minutes before moving. When he finally looked through the peephole again, the corridor was empty. He sank back onto the bed, heart racing. His phone buzzed. A new message from Clara. "I hope I didn't scare you." The driver at the bus stop let Lily use his phone. "I saved your number in case we could return the kindness someday." Ethan stared at the words. A driver. Of course. He typed back before he could overthink it. "You didn't scare me. I'm glad you're safe." The response came quickly. "We are." Aunt Rosa opened the door. "It's crowded but warm." Warm. The simplest luxury. Ethan hesitated, then typed, I'm staying nearby for a bit. If you need anything. He stopped, erased the rest. He didn't know how to finish that sentence without crossing a line he wasn't sure he was allowed to cross. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then Clara replied, "Thank you. That means more than you know." Ethan set the phone down and leaned back. Dawn crept through the thin curtains, painting the ceiling with pale light. He didn't sleep again. By mid-morning, the city was fully awake. Ethan pulled on his jacket and stepped back onto the street. The world looked different in daylight, less forgiving, more exposed. He walked until his legs ached, blending into crowds that never looked twice at him. At a corner cafe, he paused. The smell of coffee pulled him inside. The barista barely glanced up as Ethan ordered a plain cup. He paid with exact change and took a seat by the window. At the table beside him, 2 men in suits spoke in low, urgent tones. "Stock dipped 3 points overnight. It'll stabilize once he's found. They say he snapped." Ethan sipped his coffee, letting the bitterness ground him. Snapped. Perhaps that was easier than admitting he had chosen this. His phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't Clara. Breaking news notifications stacked one after another. Billionaire CEO Ethan Blackwood missing. Sources say stress may have triggered disappearance. Company shares react as search intensifies. He locked the screen. The bell above the cafe door jingled. A woman entered with a little girl clinging to her hand. Ethan's breath caught. Clara. She looked different in daylight, still tired, but cleaner, her hair pulled back neatly. Lily wore a borrowed jacket too big for her, sleeves rolled up twice. She spotted Ethan instantly. "Mr. Ethan!" she exclaimed, letting go of her mother's hand and hurrying over. Clara froze when she recognized him. Her eyes flicked to the door, then back to Ethan. Lily, wait." Ethan stood instinctively. "It's okay," he said gently. Lily beamed. "Mama, I told you we'd see him again." Clara's expression shifted from surprise to something like concern. She lowered her voice. "I didn't think. After last night." "I was just getting coffee," Ethan said. Lily climbed onto the chair across from him without asking. "We're getting hot chocolate," she announced proudly. Clara hesitated, then sighed. She insisted. Ethan smiled. "She has good taste." They ordered, then sat. For a moment, none of them spoke. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. Clara studied Ethan more closely now. The lines around her eyes tightened. "Those men last night," she said quietly. "They were looking for you, weren't they?" "Yes," Ethan replied. "Are you in trouble?" He considered lying. He didn't. "Not the kind you're thinking of." Lily sipped her hot chocolate, leaving a mustache of foam. "Mama says trouble doesn't always look scary," she said solemnly. Ethan chuckled softly. "Your mama is very wise." Clara didn't smile. "Who are you, really?" The question hung between them, heavy and inevitable. Ethan felt the weight of the truth pressing against his ribs. He could see the moment branching in front of him. One path where he told her everything and watched her trust collapse, another where he stayed silent and built something false. Before he could answer, the cafe door opened again. A television mounted near the counter switched to a news channel. Ethan's face filled the screen. "Authorities urge Mr. Blackwood to contact his family immediately." Lily turned, eyes widening. "Mama," she whispered. "That looks like—" Clara followed her gaze. Color drained from her face as recognition struck, sharp and undeniable. Her eyes moved slowly from the screen back to Ethan. The room felt suddenly too small. "You," she said, barely audible. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came fast enough to stop the realization settling in her eyes. reshaping everything she thought she knew about the man sitting across from her. Clara stood so abruptly that her chair scraped loudly against the floor. A few heads turned. Lily looked between her mother and Ethan, confusion wrinkling her small forehead. "Mama?" she asked softly. Clara swallowed, her hand tightening around the strap of her worn bag. Her eyes never left Ethan's face. "That's you," she said, not accusing, not loud, just stunned. "That's who you are." Ethan felt every ounce of distance rush back between them, thicker than the rain from the night before. "Yes," he said quietly. Lily looked back at the screen, then at Ethan again. "You're famous?" she asked, half amazed, half unsure. Clara reached for her daughter's hand. "Lily, finish your drink." "But—" "Please," Clara said gently, though the tension in her voice was unmistakable. Lily obeyed, though her eyes kept darting back to Ethan, as if he might vanish if she looked away too long. Clara turned back to him, lowering her voice. "You didn't tell us." "No," Ethan said. "I didn't." Was that part of some experiment? Her words were calm, but they carried a sharp edge now. "Some story you can tell later?" Ethan shook his head immediately. "No. I swear to you no." "Then why?" she asked. "Why pretend?" He took a slow breath. "Because for once I didn't want anyone to know. And because if you had known, last night wouldn't have happened the way it did." Her eyes flickered. She knew he was right, and that knowledge unsettled her even more. "You let my child thank you," Clara said. "You let her offer you bread. Do you have any idea what that means to someone like us?" "Yes," Ethan said softly. "That's why I didn't stop her." For a long moment, Clara said nothing. The cafe noise rushed back in, cups clinking, voices murmuring, a milk steamer hissing. Finally, she sat down again, though she didn't relax. Lily leaned closer to Ethan, whispering as if sharing a secret. "Are you still Mr. Ethan?" He smiled sadly. "Yes. That part is real." She considered this, then nodded with great seriousness. "Okay." Clara exhaled slowly, rubbing her temple. "You could have just kept walking last night." "I almost did," Ethan admitted. "But you didn't." "No." "Why us?" Clara asked. "You could help anyone." Ethan looked at Lily, then back at Clara. "Because you didn't know who I was. And you were kind anyway." That landed harder than any defense he could have offered. Clara stared down at the table. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "People like you don't usually see people like us." "I know," Ethan said. "And now you do?" "Yes." Lily finished her drink and pushed the cup away proudly. "Mama, can we sit a little longer?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "A few minutes." She turned back to Ethan. "My life is not a lesson," she said. "And my daughter is not a symbol." "I understand," Ethan replied. "And I won't treat you like one." Outside, a black SUV rolled slowly past the cafe, its windows tinted. Ethan noticed immediately. Clara did too. "They followed you," she said under her breath. "Yes," Ethan replied. Her jaw tightened. "That's dangerous for us." He stood up. "You're right. I should go." Lily frowned. "But you just got here." Ethan knelt slightly to her level. "I'll see you again," he said, surprising himself with how certain he felt. Clara looked up sharply. "You can't promise things like that." "I know," he said. "But I mean it." Another SUV stopped across the street. A man stepped out, scanning the cafe. Clara's grip tightened on Lily's hand. "We need to leave." "Now." Ethan nodded. "Go out the back. There's an alley." "You don't know that." "I do," he said simply. She didn't ask how. They moved quickly. Ethan deliberately stepped toward the counter, drawing attention. As he paid, the man from outside entered, eyes locking onto him instantly. "Mr. Blackwood," the man said, "we've been looking everywhere." Ethan turned slowly. "I told you not to escalate." "Your family is terrified," the man replied. "The board is in chaos." Ethan glanced toward the back door just as it swung shut. Relief flickered through him. "I'm fine," Ethan said. "I'll come with you." As they escorted him outside, cameras appeared from nowhere. Microphones pushed toward his face. "Mr. Blackwood, is it true you abandoned your company? Are reports of a breakdown accurate? Who was the woman you were seen with this morning?" Ethan said nothing. Across the street, half hidden by the crowd, Clara watched from the alley's edge, Lily clutched against her side. Lily waved frantically. "Mr. Ethan," she called. Ethan caught sight of them just before the SUV door closed. He raised his hand in a small wave. The door slammed. The vehicle pulled away. Clara stood frozen, heart pounding. Lily looked up at her. "Mama," she whispered, "is he in trouble?" Clara didn't answer right away. "He's complicated," she said finally. That night, Clara lay awake on a borrowed mattress, Lily asleep beside her. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry I brought chaos into your day. Thank you for last night. It mattered more than you know." She stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "You changed our morning. I don't know yet if that's good or bad." The response came almost immediately. "I hope I get the chance to prove it was good." Across the city, Ethan sat in the back of the SUV, city lights streaking past the window. His phone was confiscated, his schedule already being rebuilt without his consent. Meetings, statements, apologies drafted by people who didn't understand what he had almost lost. For the first time, he wasn't sure he wanted his old life back. And somewhere deep inside, a far more dangerous thought took root, one that would not let him rest until he acted on it. The SUV glided into the underground garage of Blackwood Tower, its polished concrete floors reflecting harsh white lights. Ethan stepped out, the familiar echo of his footsteps greeting him like an accusation. Men in suits moved with rehearsed urgency, voices low, eyes sharp. This world snapped back into place too easily, as if it had been waiting patiently for his return. Inside the private elevator, Daniel Cross stood beside him, hands clasped, jaw tight. "You scared everyone," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to," Ethan replied. "But you did." The doors closed, sealing them in silence. As the elevator climbed, Ethan felt the weight of the building rise with it, layer by layer, pressing against his chest. Upstairs, the boardroom was already full. Faces turned the moment he entered, relief, irritation, suspicion blending into a single, suffocating expression. Someone started to clap, uncertainly. It died quickly. Ethan took his seat at the head of the table without ceremony. "I'm here," he said. "Let's skip the performance." A murmur rippled through the room. "You vanished," one director said. "Without notice." "Yes. Markets don't like uncertainty." "I know." Another voice cut in. "Are you stable, Ethan?" He looked directly at the speaker. "I'm clearer than I've been in years." That answer did not reassure them. After 2 hours of explanations, reassurances, and carefully phrased half-truths, Ethan was finally alone again in his office. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city he owned pieces of, glowing and indifferent. His phone was returned, sanitized of any numbers they deemed unnecessary. Except one. Clara. He stared at her last message, thumb hovering over the screen. He typed, erased, typed again. "I didn't plan any of this. I hope Lily is okay." Minutes passed. No response. He leaned back, closing his eyes. In the quiet, Lily's voice echoed in his mind. "Are you still Mr. Ethan?" The simplicity of it hurt. The next morning, headlines softened. Narratives were adjusted. Brief retreat, they called it. Health reset. Donations were announced to stabilize public perception. Ethan signed papers mechanically, his mind elsewhere. At noon, his assistant knocked. "You have a visitor." "I didn't schedule." "She insists," the assistant said. "And she brought a child." Ethan stood so fast his chair nearly toppled. Clara entered cautiously, Lily beside her, gripping a small backpack. Security hovered outside the door, tense. "I told them I wouldn't stay long," Clara said. Ethan waved a hand, dismissing the guards. "Please," he said. "Stay." Lily looked around, eyes wide. "Mama," she whispered, "this place is huge." Clara's gaze stayed fixed on Ethan. "I didn't come for this," she said. "I came because Lily wouldn't stop asking if you were okay." Ethan crouched to Lily's level. "I am now," he said. She smiled, satisfied. Clara exhaled slowly. "I don't belong here." "Neither do I," Ethan said. That made her look at him differently. They sat. The silence wasn't awkward this time, just careful. "I don't want help," Clara said suddenly. "Not money. Not favors. I won't be a charity case." "I wouldn't insult you that way," Ethan replied. "Good," she said. "Because what you saw last night, that's my real life. I won't have it turned into a story." Ethan nodded. "Then don't let me tell it. Let me be part of it instead." She frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "Not yet," he said. Lily wandered toward the window. "You can see everything from here." Ethan joined her. "Almost," he said. "Do you see our house?" she asked. He smiled sadly. "No. But I'd like to someday." Clara stiffened. "That's not an invitation." "I know." A beat passed. "Why us?" Clara asked again. "Really?" Ethan turned from the window. "Because you reminded me of who I was before the world taught me to be careful. And because Lily offered me bread when she had almost nothing." Clara's eyes softened despite herself. "People like me," Ethan continued, "live surrounded by transaction. Everything has a price. Last night, it didn't." Lily tugged Clara's sleeve. "Mama, can Mr. Ethan come visit Aunt Rosa's house?" Clara opened her mouth to refuse automatically, then stopped. Ethan didn't speak. He waited. Clara swallowed. "It's not much," she said slowly. "And it's crowded. And—" "I don't mind," Ethan said. She searched his face. "If this becomes dangerous for my daughter, I'll disappear," Ethan said. "Completely." That answer startled her. Finally, she nodded. "One visit," she said. "No cameras. No suits." Ethan smiled. "Deal." That evening, he left his tower again, this time through a side exit, wearing simple clothes, no entourage. The city swallowed him easily. Aunt Rosa's apartment was small and loud, filled with voices and the smell of cooking. People stared when Ethan entered, but Clara introduced him simply. "This is Ethan." He sat on a folding chair, knees almost touching the table, listening to stories, laughing when appropriate, staying quiet when not. Lily beamed, proud, as if she had bridged two worlds with nothing but trust. For a few hours, Ethan forgot who he was supposed to be. Later, as he walked back into the night, phone buzzing with messages he didn't read, he realized something terrifying and exhilarating all at once. This wasn't a visit. This was a beginning. And the more time he spent away from his tower, the more dangerous his return would become. The following weeks slipped into a strange rhythm Ethan had never known. By day, he sat in boardrooms filled with polished words and sharper intentions. By night, he found himself on cracked sidewalks and narrow stairwells, carrying bags of groceries instead of briefcases. He learned which streets flooded first when it rained and which shopkeepers slipped extra bread into bags without announcing it. The city revealed itself to him in layers he had never bothered to peel back. Clara noticed the change before he did. "You're different," she said one evening as they washed dishes side by side in Aunt Rose's tiny kitchen. Lily was on the floor nearby, coloring with a broken blue crayon. Ethan glanced up. "Different how?" "You listen," Clara replied. "Most people like you don't." He smiled faintly. "Most people like me don't have anyone worth listening to." Clara stopped scrubbing. "Be careful with words like that." "Why?" "Because they can become excuses." The words landed harder than she probably intended. Ethan nodded slowly, accepting the quiet rebuke. Lily looked up. "Mama says Mr. Ethan thinks too much." Ethan laughed. "She's right." Life, however, was not content to let this fragile balance exist for long. At Blackwood Industries, whispers grew louder. Analysts questioned his focus. Executives complained behind closed doors. Daniel Cross warned him gently at first, then more firmly. "You're missing meetings," Daniel said. "You're turning down investors. You can't keep disappearing into the city like this." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Watch me." "This isn't a phase," Daniel insisted. "This company feeds tens of thousands of families." "And how many does it starve without noticing?" Ethan asked quietly. Daniel fell silent. Meanwhile, Clara's world began to shift too. Lily's school called about unpaid fees. Aunt Rose's landlord announced a rent increase. Opportunities dangled just out of reach, each one requiring something Clara couldn't give: connections, references, time. One afternoon, Clara found an envelope slipped under the apartment door. Inside was a cashier's check for an amount that made her hands tremble. She didn't have to ask who it was from. That night, when Ethan arrived, Clara held the envelope out to him like evidence. "You promised," she said. "I didn't send that," Ethan replied, startled. "But it came because of you." He hesitated. "Then I'll make it stop." "That's not the point," Clara said, her voice tight. "The point is that your shadow follows me now. And I don't know how to keep Lily safe inside it." Lily sensed the tension, crawling into Clara's lap. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," Clara said immediately, hugging her close. "Never." Ethan stood there, helpless in a way no hostile takeover had ever made him feel. "Tell me what you want," he said. Clara looked at him steadily. "I want honesty. I want choice. And I want you to understand that loving someone doesn't mean fixing their life for them." The word loving hung between them, unintended but undeniable. Ethan nodded slowly. "Then let me earn my place. No money. No influence. Just me." Clara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Days later, a storm hit the city harder than expected. Power lines went down. Buses stopped running. Ethan was stuck across town when his phone buzzed with a single message from Clara. "Lily has a fever." Panic cut through him instantly. He abandoned the car, running the last mile through rain and darkness. When he arrived, soaked and breathless, Clara opened the door with red-rimmed eyes. "She won't stop shivering," Clara whispered. Ethan didn't think. He wrapped Lily in his coat, held her small body against his chest, feeling her fragile warmth. In that moment, titles and wealth evaporated completely. They spent the night in the emergency clinic, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Ethan filled out forms with a fake address and his real fear. Clara watched him carefully, seeing not the billionaire, but the man who paced the floor and whispered reassurances to a sleeping child. Lily recovered quickly. The doctor smiled and said it was nothing serious. But something had changed. As dawn broke, Clara sat beside Ethan on a plastic chair. "You didn't have to come," she said softly. "Yes," he replied. "I did." She studied his face, searching for cracks. "This can't last," she said. "Sooner or later, your world will collide with mine. And when it does, Lily will be the one standing in the middle." Ethan swallowed. "Then I'll choose her side." Clara closed her eyes briefly. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do," he said. "And that's what scares me." The collision came sooner than either of them expected. A reporter recognized Clara outside Lily's school. Photos appeared online. Speculation followed like wildfire. Who was the woman seen repeatedly with Ethan Blackwood? Was there a secret family? A scandal? Clara's phone rang non-stop. Strangers shouted her name on the street. That evening, she faced Ethan with fury blazing in her eyes. "This is exactly what I warned you about." "I'll shut it down," Ethan said immediately. "You can't," Clara snapped. "Not without confirming it exists." Lily stood frozen in the doorway, clutching her backpack. "Mama," she whispered, "why are people talking about us?" Clara's heart shattered. Ethan knelt in front of Lily. "None of this is your fault," he said gently. "Adults make noise when they're afraid." "Are they afraid of you?" Lily asked. Ethan hesitated. "Sometimes." Clara watched the exchange, realization dawning slowly and painfully. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Clara made a decision she had been avoiding. "You have to go," she said. Ethan's chest tightened. "For how long?" "I don't know," Clara replied. "Long enough for the world to forget us." "And if it doesn't?" "Then I'll keep running," she said. "That's what I've always done." Ethan reached for her hand, then stopped himself. "I won't disappear from her life," he said. "You might not get a choice." Outside, sirens wailed and cameras flashed somewhere in the distance. And for the first time since Ethan Blackwood had stepped onto that bus in the rain, he understood that kindness had consequences, and some of them demanded sacrifices far greater than money. The next morning, Clara packed in silence. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, as if emotion might spill if she allowed even a second of hesitation. Lily sat on the bed hugging her backpack, watching with wide, anxious eyes. "Are we going on a trip?" Lily asked. Clara forced a smile. "Just for a little while." Ethan stood near the door, hands useless at his sides. He had offered help, cars, safe houses, private routes, but Clara had refused each one with the same quiet firmness. "If I leave because of you," she said, "then I'll always be running from you too." Now, watching her fold clothes that barely filled a single bag, Ethan felt the sharpest kind of helplessness. He could stop hostile mergers with a sentence, bend governments with a phone call, but he could not convince one woman to trust that his presence wouldn't ruin her life. Lily slipped off the bed and walked over to him. "Are you coming with us?" Ethan crouched down, meeting her eyes. "Not this time." Her lower lip trembled. "Did I do something bad?" "No," he said immediately, voice tight. "You did everything right." She studied his face carefully, as if searching for a crack. Then she wrapped her arms around his neck without warning. The hug was fierce and sudden, like she was afraid he might disappear if she loosened her grip. Ethan closed his eyes. Clara turned away, blinking hard. An hour later, they left before the street fully woke. No reporters. No shouting. Just the dull hum of early traffic and a sky heavy with unshed rain. Clara didn't tell him where they were going. Ethan didn't ask. At the curb, Clara finally looked at him. "You have to let us go," she said. "I know," Ethan replied. "And you can't follow." "I won't." She searched his face one last time, then nodded. Lily waved from the back seat, pressing her palm to the window. Ethan raised his hand in return as the car pulled away, shrinking into the distance until it was just another vehicle swallowed by the city. Something in him went quiet when it disappeared. The backlash came swiftly. By noon, his board demanded an emergency meeting. Investors wanted reassurance. The press wanted statements. Daniel Cross stood in Ethan's office, jaw clenched. "This ends now," Daniel said. "Whatever this is." Ethan didn't look up from the window. "No," he said calmly. "This begins now." Daniel stared at him. "You're choosing them over everything you built." Ethan finally turned. "I'm choosing to rebuild it." That afternoon, Ethan announced a leave of absence, real this time, not disguised as a retreat. Shock rippled through markets. Analysts scrambled. Commentators speculated wildly. Behind the scenes, Ethan did something far more dangerous. He started listening. He sat with community organizers, shelter directors, public school teachers. He asked questions and didn't interrupt the answers. He walked streets without cameras, accompanied only by a single security detail that stayed far enough back to be useless. Every conversation circled back to the same truth. Systems were failing quietly, efficiently, and people like Clara lived in the cracks. Weeks passed. Ethan thought of Lily often. He wondered if she still asked about him. He wondered if she believed adults always left. One evening, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. Lily lost her first tooth. His breath caught. A second message followed. "She wanted you to know." He stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Is she okay?" "Yes." Relief washed through him so strongly he had to sit down. "I didn't tell her where you were," Clara added. "Just that you were doing something important." Ethan typed slowly. "I hope one day she understands." "She already does," Clara replied. "That's what scares me." The city changed seasons. Headlines shifted. New scandals replaced old ones. Ethan's name faded slightly from the daily noise, though his shadow never fully disappeared. Then one night, everything snapped back into focus. A warehouse fire on the east side. Faulty wiring. Substandard construction. The kind of building people lived in because they had no better option. The news showed smoke, flames, chaos. Ethan recognized the address instantly. It was 2 blocks from Lily's school. He was in the car before anyone could stop him. When he arrived, the street was blocked by emergency vehicles. People stood wrapped in blankets, coughing, crying, clutching what little they had saved. Ethan pushed through the crowd, heart hammering. He saw Clara near the curb, soot smeared across her cheek, Lily pressed against her chest. Ethan reached them before thinking. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. Clara looked up, shock flashing across her face. "What are you doing here?" "Answer me." "We're fine," she said. "We got out in time." Lily looked up, eyes wide. "Mr. Ethan." She tried to run to him, but Clara held her back instinctively. The old fear surged between them again. Ethan stopped, hands raised. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have come." Clara's shoulders sagged. "I didn't tell you where we were." "I know," he said. "I saw it on the news." Silence stretched, broken only by sirens and crackling radios. A firefighter approached. "Ma'am, we need to move everyone to the temporary shelter." Clara nodded, turning back to Lily. Ethan followed at a distance, respecting the invisible boundary she'd drawn. Inside the shelter, chaos reigned. Volunteers scrambled. Children cried. Someone asked for blankets. Someone else asked for names. Ethan watched Clara navigate it all with exhausted competence. He saw the weight on her shoulders and felt the familiar, dangerous urge to lift it for her. This time, he resisted. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and worked. He carried boxes, served food, sat with an elderly man whose hands wouldn't stop shaking. No one recognized him. No one cared who he was. Hours later, Clara found him sitting on the floor with Lily, helping her tape a picture she'd drawn to the wall. It was 3 stick figures holding hands. Clara stared at it longer than she meant to. "You didn't have to stay," she said. "I wanted to," Ethan replied. She sat down across from him, fatigue softening her defenses. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she said. "Every time our worlds touch, something burns." Ethan glanced around at the crowded shelter. "Or something survives." She looked at him then, really looked. Not at the billionaire. Not at the threat. At the man who had once been cold and now sat on a hard floor, exhausted and present. "Lily," Clara said softly, "go help that woman with the crayons." Lily hesitated, then obeyed. When she was out of earshot, Clara spoke. "If you stay in her life," she said, "you don't get to disappear when it's inconvenient." "I won't," Ethan said without hesitation. "And you don't get to control the outcome." "I know. And you don't get to save us," she added. Ethan met her gaze. "Then let me stand with you instead." Clara looked away, eyes shining, as the weight of the choice settled heavily between them. Outside, the fire had been extinguished, but smoke still lingered in the air, an unmistakable reminder that some damage could not be undone, only faced. And neither of them yet knew how much more would be asked before the flames finally died. The smoke cleared by morning, but nothing went back to the way it was before. The shelter emptied slowly as families were redirected to temporary housing, names written on clipboards, promises made in careful language. Ethan stayed until the last blanket was folded, until Lily fell asleep against Clara's shoulder, her small fingers still smudged with crayon. Outside, dawn stretched pale light across the street. Clara stood there holding Lily, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. Ethan waited a few steps away, not intruding, not retreating, just present. "You should go," Clara said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "People will recognize you sooner or later." Ethan nodded. "I know." He took a step back, then stopped. "Before I do, I need you to hear something. Not as a billionaire. Not as a man with solutions. Just as me." Clara looked at him, guarded but listening. "I spent my life believing impact meant scale," Ethan said. "Numbers. Growth. Reach. I told myself that helping millions excused not knowing anyone. And then one night, in the rain, a little girl shared her bread with a stranger. And everything I built suddenly felt unfinished." Clara's grip on Lily tightened slightly. "I can't undo the danger my presence brought," Ethan continued. "And I won't pretend love fixes systems that are broken by design. But I've learned this. Real change doesn't start when powerful people decide to save others. It starts when they're willing to stand still long enough to be changed themselves." Silence settled between them, deep and honest. "I'm stepping down," Ethan said. Clara's head snapped up. "What?" "Not disappearing," he clarified. "Stepping aside. From the control. From the distance. I'm turning Blackwood Industries into something different. Employee-owned, community-governed, transparent. I'll lose power. Influence. Maybe everything I'm known for." "And why are you telling me this?" Clara asked. "Because Lily deserves a world where kindness isn't an exception," he said softly. "And because I don't want her to grow up believing men only show up when they can dominate the story." Clara searched his face, looking for ambition disguised as humility. She found none. "You're choosing the hard road," she said. "I'm choosing the honest one." Lily stirred, eyes fluttering open. She looked at Ethan sleepily. "Are you going away again?" Ethan knelt. "No," he said. "But I won't always be nearby either. And that's okay." She frowned. "Will you still be Mr. Ethan?" He smiled. "Always." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to sleep. Months passed. The headlines were brutal at first. Analysts called him reckless. Former allies distanced themselves. The stock plunged, then stabilized, then transformed. Factories reopened under worker leadership. Schools received funding without branding or press releases. Housing projects were built with residents at the planning table, not as afterthoughts. Ethan moved into a modest apartment. He learned how to cook badly and clean poorly. He took public transit. He listened more than he spoke. Clara rebuilt quietly too. A new job. A stable apartment. Lily's laughter echoing down a hallway that finally felt like home. They didn't hide anymore, but they didn't perform either. Ethan saw them when they wanted to be seen. Birthdays. School plays. Ordinary Tuesdays that mattered more than galas ever had. One evening, years later, Ethan stood at the back of a crowded community center. Lily was on stage, taller now, confident, reading from a piece of paper with steady hands. "My story," she said into the microphone, "is about a man who thought he was invisible when he had everything, and a mom who taught me that kindness is not weakness. It's a choice." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "In my story," Lily continued, "no one is saved. But everyone changes." Applause filled the room. Afterward, Lily ran to him, no hesitation, no fear. "Did I do good?" "You did great," he said, pulling her into a hug. Clara joined them, smiling. "She gets that from you," she teased gently. "No," Ethan replied. "She gets it from you." They stood there, not as symbols, not as headlines, just people bound by a moment that had rewritten their lives. Years later, when asked in an interview what truly changed him, Ethan didn't mention the boardroom or the fire or the wealth he gave away. He said this: "It was a rainy night, a bus stop, and a little girl who believed sharing bread with a stranger mattered. She was right. It changed everything." And somewhere, in a city that still struggled and still hoped, kindness continued to ripple outward, quietly, powerfully, proving that sometimes the greatest legacy isn't what you build for the world, but who you become within it.